Hey there, I am sitting here in Blender's shader editor to demonstrate my new add-on, Toxi Shader Tools. In a nutshell, it is an add-on that adds a unique hotkey arrangement similar to Amplify Shader Editor, which if you don't know what that is, I'm going to explain that in a moment, as well as the ability to bake shader nodes into textures. So well, easily do that. You can already do that in Blender. So yeah, I'm gonna demonstrate that, as well as kind of make this a tutorial. So it might be a longer demonstration, so just keep that in mind, as I'm gonna go through as many of the options and things to do with the add-on as possible. Anyway, if you don't hang out for the whole video, just know that downloads will be in the description if you just want to go check it out. And that's that. So let's get to it. So to start out, you install this add-on the same as any other. So if we go into add-ons, you click install, you find it. I already have it installed, and it will be unchecked like so. And you just click the checkbox, and hopefully it should work. Also, something to note, it doesn't show it here. You may get a warning on this that says, hey, this was not made for your version of Blender. I've developed this on Blender 2.93.0 beta, which may cause problems in the future, who knows. So most of my testing has been on this version of Blender. However, I did open it in the Blender 3 alpha, and it seemed to work all right. As well as I modified some things to make it work in some version of 2.83. I think it was 2.83.15 that did not work for me when baking something, because there's some weird bug right now where if you make a new scene and a new object and assign a new material to that object, Blender just crashes for me. So your mileage may vary there, but do note that this was developed on 2.93 beta, and it may be a little bit wonkier on other versions, but in my experience, it's pretty much smooth sailing. So there's that. So yeah, that's how you install it. Let's get to using it. So to do so in your shader editor, a nice old shader editor here, make sure you're using nodes and all that, but you go open your panels over here by pressing N or dragging it out if you're that kind of person. And down here there's a tab called Toxi Shader Tools, and there's a whole bunch here that we're going to go over, but we are going to start with a different program. Very tricky. I'm going to actually demonstrate this is Unity. This program's Unity. It's a game engine if you're somehow unaware. And this little window within Unity right here is what's called Amplify Shader Editor. It is a paid asset that is a shader editor, and it pretty much does all the same things as the free alternatives out there for Unity. But I really like how it's structured, and probably one of my favorite aspects of it is the hotkey system. So if I click the little helper window here and go down to nodes shortcuts, it may not make too much sense if you're just used to Blender, but basically the way this works is you can hold down any of these keys and then click, and you'll get the corresponding node. So if I wanted to make an add node, I hold down A and click, and bam, there we go. There's my add node right there. I can hold down D and click for divide 5 click for color, and that's 5 because 1 is vector 1, or rather float, 2 is vector 2, 3 is vector 3, and 4 is vector 4, so 5 is color. Anyway, it makes working very easy, and I'm really used to this this workflow, so I wanted to set out in Blender to do this because it's once again, it's really easy to just be like, okay, I'm gonna have a color and I'm gonna make it white and I'm gonna plug it into here, and if I had a texture, you know, I would be able to multiply it here easily and put that in here, and maybe I wanted to make the smoothness up a bit, so I'm just gonna plug that in here, and it's just really quick to just quick iteration, added nodes, and you just get things plugged in real quick. And so being super used to that workflow, I wanted to make that in Blender, which let me tell you, is my first add-on was a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. I haven't even made scripts in Python before, so it was a tough thing. Anyway, here we are in Blender. My add-on is enabled, so let's go try to do the same thing I just did in Amplify Shader Editor. So if I hold down A and click, oh wait, you know what? See, I was setting up for somewhat of a joke, but I just recorded this. I have to re-record it again. Let's say I didn't do that. I haven't used this add-on before, and I was on my normal key map. If I were to hold down A and click, nothing happens. Why is nothing happen? That's weird. A is usually, what's going on here? Okay, I messed something up. That's okay. The point is, it doesn't work out of the box. And that's why I have the key map open. So if we open the key map panel here, I can click on backup key map, and what that's going to do is it's going to create a backup key map. So this key map that I was using before is going to stay just the same. And it's going to make not only a new backup key map, just in case something really weird happens, but it's going to set us to this Toxi Shader Tools key map as well. And this is important because key maps are kind of per general editor. So while this is the shader editor, Blender views this as the node editor. And you know what else is a node editor? The compositor, as well as geometry nodes. Those are all node editors. Whereas currently the add-on, while I would like to expand it in the future, release version is just the shader editor, but the key map doesn't switch when you switch to those other windows. So it's really nice to be able to just quickly go in here and have two different key sets. Anyway, so now if we go in here and hold down A and click, still nothing happens because there's a couple more setup options here. So clicking this, which I'm going to do now, is going to deactivate any key conflicts. So if I hadn't messed up my key map before recording here, that would have removed me pressing A to select all. That would have removed my pressing B to box select, S to scale, anything that uses the hotkeys, with the exception of N, because that's still going to do this. Anything that uses the default hotkeys to make the nodes will be deactivated, so things go smoothly. One thing I'd like to do, which I already did beforehand, which is why I was very confused earlier, is I like having Blender be, you just tap A to select and tap A to deselect. I typed in the wrong thing. So if I go select all here, and go down to node editor, which I probably scrolled past, here it is. Usually that's on just A. And if I click deactivate key conflicts, you'll see that deactivates that. I like to just set that to Control A in the node editor, so I have that ability still. But once you have deactivated the key conflicts, you just activate Amplify-like keys, and now you can hold down a button. I didn't click it. I didn't actually click it when I went over there. You can hold down your buttons and have Amplify-like keys, which reminds me, my screencast keys don't seem to be on. There we go. So a couple things to note. Like I said, this currently doesn't work in the compositor or the geometry nodes or anything like that. So just keep that in mind. Another thing is I would not spam this backup key map option because this section here, which we'll get to, requires is dependent on Node Wrangler. You can use this add-on without Node Wrangler and just not be able to use this. But because it's dependent on Node Wrangler, there is an unfortunate side effect when you back up your key map, and that is the current version of Node Wrangler, and hopefully this will be changed in the future, has this issue where when you create a new key map, so let me open this up for like the 5th time, you click this plus button, name a new key map, whatever, or in my case, click the backup key map option, it will actually make duplicates of all the Node Wrangler key shortcuts. And it does that every time you make a new key map. So it just stacks on and on and on and on. And very quickly your key map becomes a very big file size. And also it probably makes Blender load just a little bit slower. So I would only back up your key map once. If you're worried about that issue, you can disable Node Wrangler and then back up your key map and then enable Node Wrangler, and that won't cause any issues. So there's that. And the other thing is, I haven't been able to quite figure it out. For some reason, sometimes after you've done this and that, which I can click these a million times if I want to, it shouldn't be a problem. After you've done that, for some reason on startup, even though the key conflicts will be deactivated, the Amplify-like keys won't be there, so you have to click on this again. I would just go in here and save your preferences, and maybe even go into file and save your startup file. I'm not really sure why it happens. It seems really inconsistent, but just note that that's a thing. Anyway, let's get into the hotkey nodes real quick. Here I've selected the closest icon I could to each of these hotkeys and what they create. You can also just click on these if you want. But Blender doesn't have an icon for every single key. So dot, this is just period. And then these little slopes is the number keys 1, 3, and 5, which another thing to note is because I couldn't figure out if you could check if the user was using numpad emulation, the 1, 3, and 5 hotkeys are going to be both on the hotkeys at the top of your keyboard and on your numpad. So that may cause issues. Who knows? Anyway, let's just go through these. Once again, you just hold down the button that's corresponding and you click. So A, S, M, D are all math nodes with add, subtract, multiply, divide. Power is E, period is dot, N is normalize. Once again, N still opens that panel, but hopefully that's not too annoying. Lerp and 1- I will get to in a moment. These are custom nodes, which I will talk about in a moment. Vector is also custom node, but that's L and O. 1, 3, and 5, as I mentioned, is value, color, or value, vector, and color. T opens up an image texture, and U does UV map, and B does separate XYZ, and V does combine XYZ, which when we get to the converter, this can be a little bit more handy. So that's all the hotkey stuff. If we also go down here into this node section, I only have one extra node right now, but that is Smooth Step. Once again, a custom node. And let's talk about these custom nodes. So these are just node groups. So if I go into Lerp here and hit tab, you'll see this is just a node group, and you can see that if we go to group here, not all of these will be added, only these 4 for now. Some of these are just part of my startup file, but it just adds these node groups the first time that you make one of these. And a thing to note about that is that if you already have, let's say you already have a node group before using the add-on named Lerp, when you go to add a Lerp, by pressing L, it will actually just create your existing node group. It will not make a new one. It won't override it or anything. This way, you can go in and edit these any way you like. You don't have to worry about it conflicting with your existing node groups. But yeah, let's talk about these node groups real quick. Let's go from the simplest, vector. I noticed that obviously Blender has a node for value and it has a node for RGB that just lets you select those. So, just select a color, select a value. But I couldn't find one just for a vector. So this is a very simple node group. It literally just inputs a vector into the output. That's all it does. It's just so you can simply be like, hey, I want to specify a vector and have it be in its own node. So that's what that's there for. 1-, also very simple. Let's get rid of Suzanne real quick. Sorry, Suzanne, and make a plane. Actually, let's just use the material we were using, and we'll look at the plane from the top. So let's say we had a UV here, and we're just looking at the X value like so. That makes a nice gradient if you didn't know that. Very handy. But let's say you wanted it going from black to white, but reversed, just from right to left. And that's what the 1- is for. It just literally takes the number 1 and subtracts it like so. Oops. Yeah, no, that's right. I did that right. That's exactly what it is in here. And the thing I did here is I made it so if you are working with a single value, you have an input for value and output for value. It just goes like that. It doesn't interact with the vector section. But if you say had a color, or let's just use the UV, and you wanted to get a 1- of that, which we can just demonstrate this here. This creates the inverse of this. You can do that as well. Personally, I don't actually find myself using the vector section so much. So like I said earlier, if you change any of these node groups, you don't have to worry about them being overwritten or anything. So what I like to do is I like to just, if I don't find myself using this portion, I just go in and remove the vector. And then when I come out of here, it's just a simple 1-. Once again, I can just use it like before, and it's just a smaller node. Anyway, so that's the 1- node. Very simple, but I end up using it a lot, so I keep it in there. Next, we'll talk about smooth step. Smooth step is already, we'll just look in here, it's already a part of map range. There's even a smoother step, which I've not really used before, but it's already a part of map range in Blender, so it's not anything custom. Initially, before I realized there was a smooth step in Blender, I actually wrote out the whole smooth step function, but that was likely inefficient. But yeah, all it is it's not only just easy access, having it on the sidebar here, but I'm used to smooth step in Amplify and other things just being your value and your min and your max, and not having 4 or these 2 extra min and max values. So it's the same thing, just a little bit simpler. So let's just for demonstration purposes, let's bring a sphere in here. Now let's bring Suzanne back. This is I don't really need to explain a smooth step because it is a part of Amplify. But let's say you were making a toon shader or something of that sort, and so you take this and then your let's see, somewhere in here, is it object info? I think it's geometry. Take this, you make your dot product of your normal and your vector, and you put it into your smooth step here, and then you've got like a light direction sort of thing going on. Smooth step's very handy to really tighten up those edges, but it's useful for a number of things. So I like to have it like that. I didn't explain that, but that's okay. Anyway, let's talk about lerp next. Lerp, and we'll go back to the plane here. lerp is linear interpolation. It's basically mix. So if we make a mix RGB node, we can go in here. We'll make two colors here. Let's say a dark blue to a red. I'll plug this into, so I can demonstrate this better. We'll do this, and you want to. I keep wanting to say lerp, but that's not the Blender term. You want to transition between these two. Usually you'd use a mix like this, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can do what I was doing before, where you put the factor in, and as it come on connect as something, so you get this nice gradient, that sort of thing. But the thing about mix that is just a little bit different than my usual workflow is it's fine when you are between 0 and 1, but let's say you want to go above 1. Nothing happens, even though this clamp checkbox isn't actually being used. Mix RGB doesn't do anything above 1. So if we were to instead plug these into this, lerp, if I could use this program correctly, we're going to plug into the vector. Once again, like the 1-, I added the ability to either plug a vector in or a value in. And once again, you could go in and remove one of these if you didn't like them both being there. But we're going to plug this in to our emission here, and it works the same, exactly the same as the mix RGB. The difference being, if you choose to go above 1, you'll see it got a little brighter there. And that can be handy because, once again, it's a linear interpolation. So if you imagine a graph in which this is a point on the graph and this is a point on the graph, and you're just drawing a line between them, 0.5 is halfway on that line, 0 is at this point, 1 is at this point. It's a linear interpolation. But the nice thing is sometimes you want to go beyond that graph, but on the same slope of that linear line. And so a lerp will allow you to do that. And that can be really handy for a number of things. I like to demonstrate it by having, like, let's have it like a really dark blue, and maybe a more reddish orange here. Let's say you've got this material that's maybe more metallic looking. Maybe a little less roughness, but you want it to be heating up. It's a metal that's heating up, so you're slowly going from this dark blue to this red, and it's starting to get red hot. And that's really red. That's really hot. But the hotter it gets, the more brighter it should be, and the more bloom should pick it up. And that's a cool, that's red hot. That's a good transition. Like, you could do this with a mix RGB and a multiply, but this is just a more of a shorthand way of doing that. And we can just look inside here once again. It's you could look up linear interpolation on Wikipedia or in a number of places, but this is it. This is how it works. You could look in here and see how it works. It's pretty simple. It's just a subtract add and a couple multiplies. Not a big deal, but there's our lerp. So that's the custom nodes. Hopefully I didn't super over explain that. Let's talk about the conversion. This should be quick. If you have a math node, it will convert a regular math node into a vector math node, like so. And then back if you wanted to. And this is just, this functionality that you're seeing right here is literally just using the node wrangler. It is telling node wrangler to use its what's it called? Let me see. If I search up math here, switch node type. So node wrangler is a thing called switch node type. And if I set this to multiply or something, let's say switch node type math. and we click that, it does the same thing, but you'll notice that it went from a multiply of vector multiply to just a float add, which isn't the biggest deal in the world, but I like to not have to, because I'm using these hotkeys, I like to be like, okay, I want to multiply these, but it actually I'm multiplying vectors. So you click on that. So basically it just takes what Node Wrangler's already doing, and it adjusts the function here to match whatever you had. Now, not all the functions of vector math are in your normal value float math, and vice versa. So it will just default to add if they don't have the same. But as long as you know, if we had sine here, there's a sine function in a regular math node, so it's gonna be there. The exception is if you're downloading 1.0 today, and you go to fraction. I discovered this while recording this video for, gosh, the second time I've recorded this video so many times. That happens, so that's fun. Be mindful of that. I'll fix it soon, hopefully by the end of the day. Everything else seems to work though, so keep that in mind. And the other things that you can convert right now are the combine and separate. So right now these just pop up with vector separate and combines, but you can change these to RGB in HSV as well, as you can see here. And if you want to go back from either of those, you just click on it, and there it is. Pretty simple. Generally, that's the HSV is actually handy, but a lot of the time Blender, at least in the shader editor, strips the color of its alpha value, so XYZ and RGB are pretty much the same, but sometimes you want to stay, you know, color coordinated with your output being yellow or whatever, so that's nice to have. And that's all that is convertible right now. In the future, I think I would like to change it so the lerp and the 1-, instead of having both value in a vector, these can be converted here as well, but I haven't done that yet, so you know, just be mindful of that. Right, so that's all the node stuff pretty much. I think I don't think there's anything else to note there. It's like Amplify Shader Editor, the wonderful program that is. Let's get into node baking. So oftentimes the way that I've been using Blender for the past week, which is, you know, I only started doing shader editing stuff in Blender about a week ago, because usually I only use Blender for modeling to get stuff into Unity, which, you know, that's why I went on this whole endeavor. Anyway, a reason I've been using it a lot is to make procedural textures, basically. So not unlike the default like brick texture that Blender provides already. I like you know, making procedural textures, but a big part of my workflow, especially if I'm, you know, using something like Substance Designer, is you know, it can be very costly to have a procedural texture, especially if you're using multiple objects in a scene, and so it can be very handy to bake these to an image file or just a texture within Blender. So you can already do that, but it's kind of a cumbersome process, so I condensed it into a little section of the add-on here. So let me demonstrate that. So let's take a magic texture, because that's fun. It's magic. It's a good fun time. Add a lot of distortion. Look how cool that is. Anyway, let's say this was our base color for our principled BSDF here. Very pretty, but it's expensive. Like we don't want to have to calculate this at runtime. We just want an image. So what we can do here is we can bake it, and the way to do that is the bake node takes whatever node you have selected, and it takes the first output of that node and bakes it. So if we wanted the factor instead, if we wanted this, we would have to somehow get that into a node. So there's a couple ways you could do that. You could like create a value and make a node group and basically do what I did with a vector before and just say, hey, oh God, do that. And then this is no different than this. It's just passing it through. There's a number of ways you can go about it. You could have an add node, you know, and you could just add 0, right? It's feels a bit like a workaround, but it was much simpler to just take the first output of whatever node you have selected. So anyway, let's say we want to bake this color here, this beautiful magic texture. There's a number of options here, and I feel like they're mostly self-explanatory, but I'll go over them anyway. So first of all, do you want to save it to an external texture? These only save to a PNG at the moment. But if you do, you check this, you choose where you want to save it, and you name your texture. Be mindful of this because if you already have a file in here with this name, it will overwrite it. There's no warning or anything. So we'll name this Fun Magic. It's a fun magic texture. And we're going to choose a smaller size for sure, because sometimes baking can take a long time and I don't want it to right now because I'm explaining things. So this is just a shorthand for a square texture. If you don't want to use this, you can input pretty much any resolution you want. Your limits are you can go only as low as 32 pixels in any dimension and only as high as 8192, which that's an 8K texture, pretty big. Not much use past that. So I'm going to select this again, so it just defaults to those. And then you choose your color space. Because this is going to be used as a base color, I'm going to choose sRGB, which most of the time that's going to be what you're using. If it's, you know, something more of like, I made a wood texture and so this is the color of the wood, you know, anything that's going to be the color of something and not driving a value like metallic or roughness is going to be sRGB. If it's going to be something that is driving a value by like metallic or roughness or a normal map, generally you want to use non-color, but this is sRGB. And then our device. I don't know if this actually affects anything. There's a bunch of settings I set, and I'll go through the process of how the bake actually works. But I don't know if this actually affects things. I think it does, but just to be sure, this sets the settings in the baking scene for what device you want to use. But you want to make sure that you have your devices set up in system settings here. So I have it set to CUDA, and right now I only have my graphics card selected, but I could select this as well. So there's that. And then once all that's done, you want to make sure, once again, you have the node selected. I would also make sure you don't have multiple nodes selected. It will only take the active node, but even though I programmed it and made sure, I don't trust myself to have you know, accounted for every like edge case. So just select the one with the first output that you want. You click bake. And there it is. It's right there, baked into this image called Fun Magic. And then if I go over to where I saved that, you'll see I have this nice texture here as well. And that's very handy. I am going to explain another use I use for this a lot in a moment, but let me explain the process of how this works, because if anything goes wrong or just not quite right, things aren't turning out the way you want them to, it can be nice to know. So the pretty much exact process that this does is the add-on. So you could do this manually as well without the add-on. The add-on takes your material, it duplicates it like so. It then deletes, it doesn't delete everything, but for this case, we're going to delete everything. It makes a new material output. New material output, hooks up what you wanted to that material output. It creates an image texture, a new one based off your values, and then set your color space where you want it to be, and just selects this. This is all stuff you probably don't need to know. And then in this new scene that you didn't even know was created, this Toxi shader baking scene, it's created a plane that it's named a baking object, and it applies that new material to that. And then it sets a bunch of values in here, and hits the bake button, basically. So that's all mentioned because while I think these values may not be adjustable manually, let's say you were baking something on a cube. Let's say you had a cube that you were baking normals for or something, and you were noticing that your bakes weren't coming out quite right when you brought the texture back in. This may be because it's just baking it on the object differently than you'd expect. So what you can do is you can bring a cube in here and just name it baking object, and the next time you bake something, it'll use that cube instead. So that's why it's handy to know the process of what the bake does. But we're not actually going to worry about that. And I'm actually going to just delete this scene. Well, actually, I don't know if that's going to work. I don't know if that's going to work. Hold on. Let's, yeah, let's do that again. And, okay, good. That did bring the plane back. Nice. Anyway, let's talk about a use case that I use this for a lot. That if you want to use the same workflows and the same way of doing things, there's something to note. So once again, I've been using this to make procedural textures and such the same way you would in a Substance Designer, or I'm trying to think of the other programs that are similar to that. Anyway, and something that's very handy, especially with game engines where you want to like have as least textures in your shader as possible and things like that, is if you have multiple grayscale values or textures that are driving different values, because they're not going to use up more than one color channel, you can bake those textures into a single multicolor texture. And that may not make a lot of sense. So let's go ahead and let's put our magic texture back in here. That's fun. It's our fun magic texture. But let's say that we had something. Let's see. Let's make a brick texture. Let's make something interesting here. We have a brick texture, and let's say we also had a noise texture of some sort. And this noise texture is going into a bump that is affecting the UVs. So we're going to add those together. This will only take a moment. Like so. So we've got some wild stuff going on here. So let's say that this here was a height map for something. This is determining the height of some texture that we have, and through that height we gain some sort of let's say a metallic value. Let's say half of it. We have it. Oh my goodness. Let's say half of it is our metallic, and the inverse of it is our roughness. And we also get, let's say, ambient occlusion. We determine some ambient occlusion from that. I don't actually know if that works that way. Does that work that way? Doesn't seem to be the case. We'll say that this is our ambient occlusion. Apologies for stumbling over that a little bit. But let's say that's our ambient occlusion. This is our metallic. this is our roughness, and that creates this really fancy shader here. It does look actually pretty cool. These are all grayscale values. This is grayscale, this is grayscale, this is grayscale, and our height, once it compiles, is grayscale. It's all black to white. We can make a texture that each color channel is one of these, and then we don't have to bake many textures. So let's create a combine XYZ here. We'll make it RGB for good measure. And we'll put, let's say we want our metallic in the red channel and our roughness in the green channel, our ambient occlusion in the blue channel. And we want to bring our height as well, but there's no alpha channel here. So we have something that looks like this, which also looks really cool, actually. And we have these 3 values, but we want to store 4 values in one texture. And we know that we can use alpha. If we bring in an image texture, it has this alpha output. So how do we get that baked? And the solution is unfortunately not something within Blender, but I'll talk about it anyway. So what we're gonna do is we're going to we'll call this texture cool, and this is our RGB mask. So this is our red, green, and blue, and we'll bake that to a texture. I'll make it a little higher resolution just so it looks a little bit nicer. So we'll bake that, and that's our red, green, and blue. And we're also going to bake a second texture that is our alpha, which is just going to be our height from here. So once again, this isn't the first thing, so we'll do an add. We'll just add 0 to this. And we'll bake this as cool A. So now we'll have 2 textures. One's our alpha channel, and one's our red, green, and blue channels. Now, there's a number of ways that you could combine these two to be a single texture, but all of them currently are going to require an external program. And initially, I was going to just show a tutorial on, like, here's how you do it in Photoshop, here's how you do it in GIMP, or Krita, or whatever, just so people had options. But I found that in every program I tried, it was still a pretty cumbersome process. And the whole point of this add-on is to automate things and be able to do things quickly. So I went ahead, I went the extra mile, and I wrote a program for this specifically. So let me move this to my other monitor so you can see this a little bit better. I will include this as another download in the description. In fact, it's already uploaded at the moment. So all you have to do with this program is take your texture that you want to be your RGB color and your texture that you want to be your alpha color, and you choose where you want to save it. So in this case, I'm actually going to save it cool _, and because our metallic is in the red channel, I'm going to say M. That's not an M. M. Our roughness is in the green channel. I'm going to say R. Let's see, our next was ambient occlusion. I'll say A, and our last was our height. So RGBA is metallic roughness, ambient occlusion, height. And so we'll select where we're going to save it there. And we have one option here. By default, this is going to take the red channel of this texture, because even though it's black and white, it is still a color texture with red, green, and blue channels that are all the same. So it's just going to take the red channel. But let's say you actually had photoshopped a transparent PNG that you wanted to put that alpha channel onto this texture. You could check use alpha channel and it will use that instead, but we don't have that, so we're just going to click combine and save. It's going to create a texture that looks like this, and if we look in our folder now, we have that texture. And now we plug this in. It's going to be lower resolution than our procedural texture here, but we can take all this and move it out of the way. We can separate these, and we'll make it RGB just for good measure. and we knew that this was our metallic, this was our roughness, our ambient occlusion. I guess we could go ahead and set that up, and we'll actually subtract this from that. So that's our ambient occlusion, sure. And then we have an alpha channel now that actually works, and this was just our height. We didn't actually use this, but if we wanted to, we could put it into a, I don't know, we could put it in a bump, right? And then use that as our normal map. And there we go. We combine that. Oh my goodness, I didn't show any of that. I'm so sorry. I separated the color here. This is our image texture. I just brought it in here and did some stuff with that. But you can see that the color, the RGB, and the alpha are all working in Blender now. Ah, man. So dumb of me. I'm not re-recording this. That mistake is staying in. So that's the baking, as well as a little extra. So that program here will be available as well. Currently baking, and that program only supports PNG. Perhaps in the future I will change something. The other thing about this program is right now it's only on Windows. I'm close to making it work on other platforms. Well, at least on Linux. I'm not able to test Mac OS, but Linux, I'm having weird problems with the file selection. But once I get that fixed, I'll upload a Linux version as well. But yeah, that's that. Sorry for the long-winded demonstration / tutorial, but I wanted to cover all my bases. This is my first add-on, so please be gentle. But yeah, I will probably be adding more to this in the future. The whole point of this was just to make shader editing more comfortable for me as I learned how to edit shaders in Blender. But I know other people will benefit from this. So thanks for checking it out. Once again, these are in the description. They're links to Gumroad. You can choose whatever price you want for them. Just enter 0 if you just want to download it. But if you do throw a few bucks my way, I am super appreciative, but definitely don't expect it. I just want people to have a good time in Blender. So there you go. If you've got any suggestions or questions or anything like that to add to this, feel free to ask in the comments of this video, or on my Twitter, which I guess I'll also have in the description. But yeah, you know how to navigate the internet. You'll figure it out. Thanks for checking it out. See you later.